Welcome to Congress in Context. This is the deep dive where we try to cut through some of the noise and give you the essential insights from Capitol Hill.
And today we're looking at Friday, September 19th, 2025. A really, really dramatic day.
Absolutely. High-stakes negotiations, a government shutdown looming.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about the money. The whole place was also reeling from recent political violence, sparking some pretty intense debates on the floor itself.
Right. So the headline was the Senate failing to pass any funding bill. But we want to dig into H.R. 5371. That's the continuing resolution, the CR, that the House did manage to pass.
And specifically, we need to unpack the policy extensions, the things buried inside this supposedly clean stopgap bill. Well, they weren't insignificant.
Okay, so let's set the stage. It was chaotic getting to this point.
The House did pass its funding bill, H.R. 5371. They called it the Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act. Quite optimistic, maybe?
That vote was incredibly close, though. 217 to 212, just scraped through.
It did. And the idea was simple. Push the deadline to November 21st. Buy some time, basically, to negotiate the full-year funding bills.
But not before the Democrats tried their own move, right, an MTR.
Exactly. They offered a motion to recommit, trying to swap in their own funding proposal, H.R. 5450. But that failed, 210 to 218.
So the House passed their bill. They, kicked the can down the road.
Successfully, yes. But then H.R. 5371 hit the Senate, and everything just ground to a halt.
Tell me about that Senate failure. It sounds like a total breakdown.
It really was a perfect legislative stalemate, you could say. They tried two different funding bills.
Two?
Yeah. First, the Democratic proposal, S-2882. Yeah. It failed. 47 yeas to 45 nays. Not enough.
Okay.
And then they tried the Republican bill, the one the House just passed, H.R. 5371. That failed too. Even worse, actually. 44 yeas to 48 nays.
Wow. So neither one even got close to the 60 votes they needed.
Not even close. And the immediate takeaway for you listening has to be this.
Yeah.
Both parties could block the other side. Deadlock.
Total veto power for each side, but no power to actually govern, it seems. That September 30th deadline. Still hanging over everyone.
Absolutely. And, listening to the floor debate, the way they talked about the CR, it was like two different realities.
How so?
Well, Republicans were saying, look, this is a clean, short-term stopgap. No tricks, no partisan riders, just keeping the lights on.
The message being, let's restore regular order, allow those conference committees on the big bills, MilCon VA, Ag legislative branch to keep working.
Right, and they basically accused the Democrats of manufacturing a crisis, making extraneous demands that had nothing to do with funding the government.
But the Democrats pushed back hard. They said H.R. 5371 was anything but clean.
Oh, yeah. They called it, I think the phrase was, partisan, reckless, dirty spending bill. Strong words.
And their main focus was health care, wasn't it? This big, ugly bill they kept mentioning.
Exactly. They argued that earlier legislation, this big, ugly bill, had baked-in problems that were now causing a healthcare crisis, rising costs, potential cuts to Medicaid.
And they connected that to the CR, saying passing it would mean letting, 15 million people potentially lose their healthcare coverage?
Yeah.
Because it didn't fix those underlying issues, like expiring ACA subsidies.
Precisely. And to back up the not clean argument, they pointed out, look, 67 pages of this 91-page bill aren't even appropriations. They're policy extenders, mostly healthcare stuff.
That's a lot of policy for a simple funding patch.
It is. And then there were these really serious accusations Democrats were leveling against the Trump administration. Yeah. Specifically naming Russ Vought.
What were they alleging?
Accusations of unlawfully stealing and freezing over $410 billion. Funds already committed, they said, for things like NIH research, CDC operations, even nonprofit security grants.
And their point was?
Their point was that a shutdown, or even just passing the CR without addressing it, allows that alleged financial maneuvering to just continue.
And this wasn't just abstract political fighting. There were real-world impacts being discussed. Hurricane Helene.
Yeah, a representative from North Carolina brought that up. Said a shutdown would stop disaster relief dead in its tracks for his constituents in the western part of the state, almost a year after the hurricane hit.
So the stakes were incredibly high. Not just fiscal, but immediate human cost.
Definitely. And layered on top of all this budget chaos was this really raw, emotional debate about political violence.
It really seemed to dominate the proceedings at times. Condemnations of the assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah.
Yes, multiple speeches on that. But it wasn't unified grief. Other awful events were mentioned too. The attempt on Donald Trump the arson at Governor Shapiro's home, the murder of former Speaker Emerita Melissa Horton and her husband.
The Kirk situation really exposed a deep split, didn't it?
It absolutely did. When a resolution came up to honor Kirk, some members flat out refused to support it.
Why? What was their reasoning?
They cited his rhetoric, used phrases like divisive, disparaging, and too often rooted in grievance. They even quoted specific things he'd said about black women, about the Civil Rights Act.
But others pushed back on that.
Oh, yeah. People like Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Grothman. They argued that, regardless of what you thought of his words, his case now represented fundamental principles like free speech and vigorous debate.
So even in condemning violence, there's this profound disagreement about language, about rhetoric, about where the lines are. It's quite something.
It really shows the depth of the division. Okay, let's shift gears a bit, away from the fireworks of the funding fight and the emotion.
Right, let's talk about the quiet part, the actual legislative mechanics happening inside H.R. 5371, the stuff they managed to agree on, even if just temporarily.
Exactly. The policy extender is keeping things running until November 21st. Because remember, while the Senate couldn't pass this bill, these provisions were in the House-passed version. This is what they were trying to enact.
Okay, let's zero in on that fine print. You said a lot of it was health and veterans stuff.
Yeah, Titles 1 and 2 were HHS Health and Human Services. They temporarily extended funding for things like the special diabetes programs.
Those are critical. How much funding?
Just over $22.6 million for the Type 1 program, and the same amount, $22.6 million, for the special diabetes program for Indians. Just enough to get them to November.
What else in help?
Extenders for national health security programs, those acute hospital care at home waivers continued. Oh, and letting authorized oral antiviral drugs be covered under Medicare Part D temporarily.
Seems very specific. And there was money for hospice surveys.
Yep, $6 million extended for Medicare hospice surveys. It shows you a level of detail, even in a stopgap. It's not just broad strokes. It's specific program funding.
And Title VI, that was about the No Surprises Act.
Right, not just extending funding, but adding another $15 million specifically for HHS to keep implementing the No Surprises Act.
So even with all the fighting, they're pushing ahead on rolling out that big consumer protection law for medical bills?
It seems so. It shows that some administrative priorities continue regardless of the top-line budget battles.
Okay, and Division D, that was all Veterans Affairs.
All VA extended the authority for collecting co-pays for hospital and nursing care. And critically, funding for supportive services for very low-income veteran families.
How much for that? That sounds important.
It is. It was $92 million allocated to last until November 21st, a significant amount to bridge that gap for vulnerable vets.
Anything else for the VA?
Yeah, they extended the Inspector General's subpoena power. That's key for oversight. And then there was quite a bit of detail on the VA partial claim program.
The home loan assistance one? What did they do there?
It wasn't just extending it. The bill laid out specific changes the VA had to make in how it runs the program. Plus, it mandated GAO oversight, the Government Accountability Office, with annual reports required.
So they're using the CR not just to fund, but to actively reform a program.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
It's using that must-pass nature of the CR to legislate specific policy changes. It happens more than you might think.
And wait, Title V. Something about FDA and over-the-counter drugs in a stopgap funding bill. How does that even fit?
Huh. Yeah, it seems odd, right? But it's often how these technical but necessary policy adjustments get made. They get attached as policy glue to legislation that absolutely has to pass.
So what did Title V actually do?
It reformed the user fee structure for OTC monograph drugs. That's the process for approving common over-the-counter ingredients. And it tried to clarify the rules for switching drugs from prescription only to non-prescription status.
So pretty complex regulatory stuff.
Definitely. Updating standards for topical ingredients, calling for guidance on non-animal testing. It affects consumers, it affects industry, and it got tucked into this emergency funding measure while the Senate was completely deadlocked.
Okay, so pulling it all together, what's the outlook now? We're staring down this November 21st deadline again.
And the pressure is just immense. Nothing's fundamentally changed. The big fights that sank the CR in the Senate, they're still there.
Especially healthcare, right? That big, ugly bill debate, the ACA premium tax credits expiring. That sounds like the main event for the next round.
I think it absolutely is. That's going to dominate the next negotiation. Those issues are front and center.
And there was another fight bubbling up, mentioned on the floor, this California Proposition 50 thing.
Yeah, that came up. Members framing it as an alleged sham redistricting effort by the governor there, trying to overturn an independent commission.
What caught my ear was the price tag mentioned.
The $282 million estimate just to hold the snap special election required by that proposition.
Yeah.
It's a staggering figure.
It really puts a number on political maneuvering, doesn't it? And shows how state-level fights are spilling into Congress, framed as issues of electoral integrity and cost.
Exactly. Nearly $300 million. That's the context for some of these debates now.
So if you connect these threads, the budget standoff, the policy items hidden inside, the raw emotion over political violence, what does it tell us?
Well, it paints a picture of a Congress that's not just divided on spreadsheets, The divisions run deeper. It's about fiscal choices, yes, but also regulatory details.
Right.
And fundamentally about the nature of democratic engagement itself. What's acceptable rhetoric? What are the boundaries?
It really makes you wonder, is this fragility just about money, or is it something deeper? An ideological clash that's becoming harder to bridge?
That's the big question, isn't it? Okay, so for you listening and trying to make sense of all this,
Yeah.
what can you actually do?
Right, some practical steps based on what we saw. First, if you care about those specific programs, diabetes funding, VA support, the No Surprises Act, track them. Use the bill numbers we mentioned, HR 5371, and look them up on congress.gov, see what happens next.
Second, keep a very close eye on that healthcare debate. The big, ugly bill, the ACA subsidies, that's where the action will be for the November 21st deadline. Understanding those specifics helps you tell your reps what you think matters.
And finally, pay attention to the language. How did your representatives talk about the political violence? Did they condemn it? Did they qualify their condemnation? What did they say about free speech versus harmful rhetoric?
Their words, or sometimes their silence, tells you a lot about how they view civil discourse and the health of our democracy right now.
Understanding the details, the policy writers, specific funding claims, the careful rhetorical choices, that's really the key to being an informed citizen, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You have to get past the headlines to see what's really moving.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us.